And
Good afternoon. We are here at a joint committee meeting of the Fire Committee and the Buildings Committee. I see a quorum for the Buildings Committee, and there is a quorum of sort for the Fire Committee, except the chair is not here yet. So if we could proceed to confirm the quorum on both sides, I suppose, but to ratify first the draft minutes of the joint meeting, June 17. Mr. Baysmith, Mr. Bessel, you received copies of the minutes a couple of days ago. Any comments on them?
They appeared as I remember them.
Okay, Mr. Bessel?
As well, items, let's see, the elements under item 3, I think we can take for granted that the ultimate authority rests with council. However, yeah, fire is responsible for inside, buildings responsible for the building.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, it appears as I recall as well.
Motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we want to continue this discussion. When we met last week, Marty and Ron Vischer presented 6 projects for the Glendale Fire Department space that they offered to support, and in priority order quickly. By the way, the plan is to return to our desire to keep minutes to 1 hour. So that's what the plan is today, an hour or less, hoping we can do that. In priority order, HVAC replacement, reconfiguration of the east facade and apron, including a baby box, stair repairs, training room technology, relocation of the second floor kitchen, and an electrical plan upgrade for additional receptacles and switches. Since then, we've had more information. Buildings Committee member Mike Bessel was the engine on the working group that oversaw phase 2 of the firehouse plan, and he met with the chief and a contractor about the projects on the list, 2 of which we've already, as you know, agreed to, that are the immediate responsibilities of the village, the HVAC and the stairs. But about the HVAC, when phase 2 work was completed, the village committed to making a good faith effort to live within the existing system for a year to see how it would work. But given the range of temperatures throughout the building, it clearly needs some attention. And we think it could be addressed initially by rebalancing the system, adding dampers. That's the immediate strategy. Then the good news on this second piece, the stairway, is that it's structurally okay. We just need to replace the tile and the treads and add a railing. And this can be moved ahead and covered by the maintenance budget. Mike, Mr. Bessel, would you like to elaborate on those 2 items, please? Or did I capture it for you? And you are muted, sir.
I go again. You never know when the cat's going to show up, so I mute the thing. The dog, he's quiet, but the cat talks.
Yeah, okay.
So, you covered the 2 big ones, and there were 2 other things that we looked at just so that we could maybe try to get a little bit ahead of the game, since one of the contractors that could provide some cost was there, so we let him look at some other things. So you hit the nail on the head with the HVAC, and there's ability to do that. And I believe, Wally, were you able to look at the old quote and verify that it falls within what would have been appropriated money?
Yes, it was just shy of $16,000, the original quote for new HVAC, and we do have that encumbered should we wish to do that in the future.
Got it. Okay. And then the stair at some point during the initial phase of the project, and I I want to clarify, I was not necessarily in the engine on the original phase 2 work, but I am certainly trying to work on the current phase 2 work. Bear with me 1 minute. Okay. So on the stair, at one point in time, it was going to be done as a part of that whole budget. At another point, we talked about moving some things around. At one point, the firefighters were going to try to put tile down. And it's just one of those things that was lost in the shuffle because it was out of sight, out of mind. So in looking at it with the chief, it appears that there's a little bit of softness on some of the plywood that's on the landings. That can be fixed. It's not really dangerous. The only thing I suggest, and I suggested to the chief, is get the loose tiles off because somebody could slip. While we were looking at the stair tile, it was pointed out that the treads could actually use some work in some areas. So what we're going to get, budget pricing on is replacing treads that are necessary to replace, replacing the tile that's in bad shape. There are tile on landing they're functional, but they're dirty, and it's just not going to look good. So we're pricing all of it. So we will have that in hand soon, along with the handrail. One other thing that we looked at was the baseboard that's missing. And how that came about, I think I mentioned before, we had an overall flooring plan. We deviated from that flooring plan. Walls were put up. We didn't have definition for floor at that point. Some places had carpet, some places had nothing, whereas before it was a totally sealed floor with area rugs as necessary. So as we got towards the end of that project, it was, how will we address this floor? What kind of money do we have left? What can we do to address the floor? And of course, the contractor was substantially finished. He left without putting baseboard on. The floor has to be done, and then the baseboard gets put on. So that's why that's not there. It was lack of definition that in the beginning that led to that. We're getting pricing for that baseboard. The last thing that was asked about was electrical outlets. The original plan had just standard outlets placed per construction standard. I think now that we have better definition of what's necessary, we're also going to have priced electrical outlets. Now, if all of this can fit within what was already appropriated, and I'll fall back to Wally again, we spent $49,000. We appropriated $72,000. Do we have 20,000, roughly 22,000 left?
We do, sir, but that's not really the problem. The problem was we were capped at not going over 50. Should we resume the same project that's not concluded, then we are in violation of the Ohio bidding laws that we were trying to avoid. So recall that we did 2 bids. They came in extremely high. We had instructions from the solicitor that we needed to be under 50,000 to negotiate with the contractor, and we did that. Some things were removed. But for us to, at this time, start adding more back to it, we're back in the same situation where we're exceeding 50,000.
I understand.
And that's within 1 year of the project termination?
That was the advice of our solicitor at the time. Our fiscal years that are audited will be forthcoming year 2019 and 20.
Mm-hmm.
So Laura suggested that if we do decide for the new HVAC system, that we do it in 21, which is a separate audit year, which keeps it entirely separate.
I'm wondering too, if some of the project, like the stairs, can't come out of a maintenance budget for the building. I mean, the stairs would be, that's a pure maintenance issue to me. And if we have a maintenance budget for the building, then that's where I would look to find that money. And if we need some additional money in there, we can appropriate it.
I would agree with that, Don, since the stair is not exclusive to the fire department. It also services town hall and other parts of the building. And I believe it's accurate to say that would be a maintenance item.
Perfect. So is there additional discussion on this, or could we move ahead and the buildings committee, maybe we could have a motion. The buildings committee recommends that the village move forward on these items as we've discussed them. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. Could could I have a motion to do what I just described?
Okay, when you said to move forward with these projects. you've
These-
got the-
These items, one being with rebalancing the HVAC within the current contract without, I mean, that's not, we're not adding to the contract, the HVAC.
Which again, I would consider maintenance. I mean,
Correct.
that in fact, you've got a system that isn't working properly and you just need to adjust it and make it work better or try to make it work better. And that's what we always set out to do.
John, that's correct. I agree with that. And it's perfectly normal in a construction setting that an HVAC system has to be balanced once you move in. And so that's normal course.
So to go back, the recommendations are to go forward with the projects which include rebalancing the HVAC system, making repairs, replacements, and improvements to the stairway, tile and treads and railing as needed, through the maintenance budget. And I guess we could can we include the receptacles and switches, or do we pull that out for a second and return to it?
I would struggle with that one a little bit.
All right, let's,
For maintenance. So I think that's something, let's look at what it would cost, see if we have any money left within our limits, and we'll do what we can now. And if
agreed.
we have to do something later, we can do that. I mean,
Okay,
this is all in the context of we're trying to make the system work with spending only the money that keeps us below the $50,000 limit.
Okay, so could I go back, could members of the committee recommend, or should we, or is there a motion, sorry, is there a motion for the committee to recommend to the village to move forward on those items that we just discussed? A motion to move forward.
Nancy, this is Alan. Do you really need a motion?
I don't know, I'm just,
I would say turn it over to Wally and his staff and say, these are two tasks you got to get done.
do we,
I agree with that,
You
Alan.
need to vote on council. This is your committee.
Fine.
I agree with that also.
all right, done.
Can I add one thing? I'd like the fire chief to take the lead on this with me. I'm not up every day. Such things as having the HVAC guy come back and balance, he could be very helpful to coordinate that and let him in and show him what the problem is. But I'd like it to be a team effort, please.
Great, thank you.
I would also ask that our treasurer, Mr. Beaugrand, who has a lot of experience in construction, be involved as this project goes forward. I don't know if he needs to be involved with the HVAC or the stairs, but I would leave that to the discretion of him and Mr. Cordes and the chief.
Could I ask you to hold that discussion, because there's another element that I want to bring up that addresses where you are and the questions that have been raised. Hold your fire on that just a bit. So let's move back to the project list. So we've taken out those items. The remaining four, I'm going to include the electrical plan in that, but the remaining four items, the reconfiguration of the east facade to allow for some outdoor gatherings, and the installation of a baby box system, training room technology, relocation of the second floor kitchen, and the electrical plan. All right. Now, somewhat out of order, I agree. I propose that the fire committee take on the question of the safe haven baby box program, specifically the legal and the operational aspects of the fire department offering the service. And the fire committee can decide that, and if it supports the idea, it could make a recommendation to council, and then we would see how that relates to buildings. But at this point, it hasn't been approved by council or by the committee. So That's my proposal. Good. Debbie is here. How does the fire committee feel about that? Taking the issue of the baby box and deciding that separately from what we're talking about here.
I think it has to be decided by the fire department prior to any decision on the east facade. I know you had done some research on the baby box and the safe haven, and you had some questions about it. But I would like the fire department to come to some consensus on whether they want to go forward, and if there is any disagreement because of the it's a very delicate situation if somebody leaves a baby and our fire department maybe is out on a call or something. So I just think we have to look at the legalities and everything, and would be referred to a future fire committee meeting.
Okay.
If that's okay with let's see, who's Jeff and Alan. Is that okay with you?
Yes, with me.
Okay.
Alan, all you have to do is wave.
You've got
Yeah,
your finger.
I think that's, I mean, none of us know anything about it. So
Well,
I think go ahead, Debbie, and let get the you know, the vishers and the chief and the mayor and everybody else who wants to be involved and come up with a design and a program. Because you know, you're going to have more than just, oh, by the way, there might be a baby in the box. I mean, there's got to be some notification that a baby was left, or somebody has to check it every day, or what. I don't know anything about the program.
and Alan, I think with you and Jeff, it's imperative that you feel comfortable with the details of the Safe Haven program. So that has to be described in a future meeting. So
Sure.
we will do that. And then, you know, the fire committee can determine whether we would go forward with it and bring it before council.
Agreed.
Good.
Agreed.
That brings us now to the list.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
Nancy. I just wanted to make a comment on the baby box and all of that discussion. I think as we heard it, it was providing additional services, that the fire department wants to provide additional services. We support that, and whatever those services are, if it's a baby box, if it's something else, that's really, I think, and because we're not in a position to decide, or but we support the idea of additional services, and also the notion of the social services aspect of this, I think, fall into the fire department's purview, just my opinion, because when they go into a home or they go to treat an emergency medical situation, they're dealing with what I would consider a social situation. They're accustomed to these types of services. So I think that having the discussion about what it is and what it should look like is fine. I mean, we're happy to be involved in the discussion, but the spirit of it is in providing services.
Thank you.
From our standpoint.
And Marty, the other thing is, we need to consider what is the sustaining cost to continue. You know, once you put it in, I know there's a $10,000 fee up front, and the chief was able to get a grant, but what are the ongoing costs associated with it? And is that something that we want to incorporate into the fire department budget? So there's a lot of details that we need to further understand about the program. But I agree
Thank
with
you.
Yes. Okay.
So now we go back to the remaining elements on the list. And if we could, we'll start with the proposal to upgrade the technology in the training room. The chief has got an early estimate that puts that work at potentially $26,000 or more. Now, assuming the Vischer gift will cover this work, do any of the members of the committee oppose exploring this particular improvement? to determine the cost and the specs of this.
Nancy Allen. Is that a question to buildings or a question to the fire?
Buildings.
I think that should be a question to fire.
Right. It's technology should be fire. If it's not bolted down, it belongs to fire.
Yeah.
And I think the chief has to make that
However,
proposal.
Yeah.
But
except
I don't believe there's building renovation that's going to have to take place.
it's a
for new
slew of
training thing.
it's equipment. I'm looking at the list. Actually, you could be right.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any building renovations or things that need to be done for that. Chief, am I right?
I think you're right.
Yeah, so there are, the biggest part of it is going to be just equipment. So it's integration of the monitors that we currently have, the computer system we have, bringing in one more training. It's like a smart board kind of thing. But yeah, like most all of it is bolt-on equipment. There will be potentially the opportunity or need to put in a couple of receptacles maybe. It does have an equipment cabinet where everything's tied together and coordinated through, but that's really about it as far as a building product.
So we will move that, unless there's an objection, we would move that to the fire committee. Okay with you, Mr. Bessel and Mr. Baysmith?
Okay with me, yes.
Okay.
Just a slight consideration, the initial cost of the investment is one element of it, but as Debbie mentioned, what is the expected ongoing cost to maintain that equipment, which the village could potentially have to take on?
Correct. And I was going to also, I think someone mentioned installation, et cetera. It all has to be considered.
Okay.
I know the proposal that I have includes all that installation as far as ongoing costs. Other than what we currently have with both our integrated internet system between us and the business, cable TV, which we currently have, a fiber optic. What we do, that's all there.
Okay. So that leaves us now, we're down to two parts of the list, two pieces. The idea of moving the kitchen downstairs to the gathering space on the east side. Plus, let me wrap it with the idea of the east facade. We've discussed a couple of options on the reconfiguration of the east facade to enhance the building, to enable easier use of the outdoor space, make the gathering space more energy efficient for the firefighters and stuff. And there's been a number of suggestions that we've talked about. One is to remove the existing doors and add brick and windows, but that permanently changes the building and the use of that side. Those are permanent changes, which we've been reluctant to even consider until this point. Rather, is there a way, before we talk about kitchen, is there a way to achieve the goal of making that space more usable for the firefighters without making permanent changes? And what I'd like to propose, we can have some discussion, but I'd like to propose that we have a working committee that would flesh out the options with that space, including moving the kitchen downstairs. If this committee, first off, if the Vishers are still okay with us talking about these projects and this price range, what if we had a working committee consisting of the Vishers, a representative of the Firefighters Association, Debbie and me, and headed by two co-project managers, Chief Hardwick and Mike Beaugrand. And what this working committee would do would look at the options for that east side to achieve what I think everybody wants to do for the firefighters, and that's to make it that space, that's the inviting space that they want to do, and make it accessible to the outside. There are tons of options, including replacing doors and bricking up the side, to refurbishing the doors that are there now, and perhaps making one open up or not. But could this committee, what would you think about forming this committee that would look into the real specifics of the various options and the price of those options, including moving the kitchen downstairs? So that's a lot to unpack, but discussion.
Nancy, I had one question. Moving the kitchen downstairs, is that dependent on closing in the east side, or could the firefighters, could we go forward on putting the kitchen, in that area, and then later making the decision on, I think they still have access to the area if they go out that, let's see,
The
that
side door.
west door.
Yeah.
But that way we don't delay the kitchen project.
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think with a little bit of creative, how they use it type of be there a few months, that could be made into a fairly nice looking eating cafeteria kitchen type area, with the big glass on this with an east facing wall. The glass would be really kind of an interesting and a nice effect when you're eating and cooking. You can see outside. I would then recommend too that the upstairs kitchenette, which I call it, just be left alone, so that when you're upstairs and you want a cup of coffee or a soda pop, you don't have to go down the 2 flights of stairs to get to a soda pop. So I think that there could be a pretty nice solution. I know kitchens are very expensive depending on what you have in it. I think that floor is still open to the, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike Bessel, but the floor is still open to the basement where the plumbing and the water and the drains all are. Am I correct?
Alan, I'm not, you could open it up any way you want. I'm not 100% certain where the plumbing is downstairs.
In the basement.
In the basement. I'm not sure if there's plumbing in that area, but if you can run plumbing there, it will just cost, but you can run plumbing that way, or you could come through the ceiling, whatever is the easier to do.
So the addition would be a water line, a drain line, some electric, and cabinetry and furniture. Is that
Exhaust.
Yeah.
pretty much what we're dealing with here?
What's that?
That's pretty much what we're dealing with. The thing I worry about is you're going to lose some training space, and that's up to the chief, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Alan, did you just?
Bathrooms in the front part of that building in the lobby, so it'd be a matter of where's the shortest distance.
Well, you know where the door that comes in off of Sharon Road.
Right, there's plumbing there, and there are 2 bathrooms.
It would come into the kitchen.
Yeah.
Or the backside. I think that's kind of a, since we never thought about it when we had the first phase and the second phase, if this is going to be another phase, I think the chief has to say, we can spare this much room. We can't spare this much room. We've got, they went through quite a bit of layout on that to get to where they are today. And if we're going to change that, and, we'd have no budget for that. So if the visitors and the community say that's important, then we could do some fundraising. We're only looking at a few $1,000s for the plumbing and electric, and I mean, the rest is cabinetry and some nice, little nicety things that the fire department makes their own.
Okay, I think we're getting a little detailed here, and I'd just like to note that what I'm hearing is there is general agreement in principle to the idea of moving the kitchen from upstairs to downstairs. How that happens and what equipment gets moved and what gets used, those are things that the working group would have to make decisions on.
Yes, thank you. That plus any changes to the east facade to try to bring this space into what the firefighters are dreaming of and what we see as possible. Marty and Ron, I'm sorry, Jeff, did I see your?
No,
Okay,
I have
okay.
no further comment at the moment.
Marty and Ron, does this?
So Nancy, I think Mike, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. First, I agree with the proposal you made about a working committee. I would, if anybody is interested in my recommendation, I would have the president of the association, Adam Eigel, be on the committee. Okay, for this, and we're talking about the kitchen and space and facade of the East End.
Correct.
What I would do then, if I were in Adam's shoes, and I would recommend it, is that then he assembles a group of people from the fire department, the firefighters, and they have a slightly different task, because the task now is to take that East End space and make it a kitchen and livable and interactive area the way they want it. And their creativity as to how you can handle doors and how you can, I mean, they have a beautiful piece of artwork there already that was donated with commemorating 9/11. I think if that can be done, then we accomplish the purpose of getting the firefighters involved. Now, there are a couple of them here. Are you all, do you agree basically with what I just said?
Yeah.
I mean, would you
Yeah,
be?
it would be nice for us as the firefighters and staff at the station to have a place that we've designed that is our own.
Right. And so, but they would have the added constraints, if you will, about not permanently changing the building, that they would have the requirements also. But if we let them go at it, if you will, I've watched their creativity and innovation, and many of them have work experience doing some of this kind of thing. So I think, provided that I'm not overstepping what Captain Eigel would agree with, and he can certainly speak up if he wants. We can help facilitate that, because I think that's in the spirit. And then while the fire committee is addressing the baby box issue, if that can be going along in parallel with their planning, then I think we end up, because the east side of the building, the baby box and the kitchen are all interrelated at some point, and you would want the teams working, kind of on the same timeline, so they know what they can and cannot do with the space at some point. But for now, I think the first step would be starting to look at possibilities, and our intention with the donation is to provide funds for these things. So again, I'm sure people will be, prudent in terms of the costs of items. So I think it's in the spirit of what we had in our proposal.
And I'm sorry, was Ron gonna?
Thank you. I'll be quiet.
No, so we've sort of trimmed the wish list, at least at this point, to the tech work, which is going to be handled by the fire committee. and then the kitchen and the reconfiguration of whatever, however that's done, of the east facade. So those last two pieces would fall into the working committee. And I hear you say, I think, Marty and Ron, that with input from the Firefighters Association, which we would get because Captain Eigel would be a member of this working committee, we'd hear how we're doing. We'd hear if this is the right thing. Does this still fit your goal?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Nancy,
Yes.
I would like to suggest that part of the planning commission be involved in this, particularly related to the east facade, because as you recall, we had considerable conversations over the number of windows in the fire door. And we'd like to try to avoid that so that there is not some future conflict with the planning committee.
Absolutely, Mr. Basement. The way I see this working is the committee comes back to the buildings, and maybe it's another joint meeting. I'm not sure. I thought that this might be the last joint meeting, but whatever. But the working committee would come back and say, these are the elements that we've discovered. This is what our preference is, and because it involves the buildings and it involves the building committee. Building committee then decides, yes, that's what we want to do, or we want to make these various changes, and then it goes a recommendation. I think then it goes to planning before anything else. I mean, yeah, I agree. We wouldn't do anything without that.
Planning,
Absolutely not.
Nancy, only planning if there's any exterior changes made, because planning is not going to be involved with the kitchen renovations. Or anything like that.
Correct. But yeah, correct. Okay. I think we have come to the end of the agenda. Oh, well, no, at least the end of 3A on the agenda. And I think
have two other small points. Number one, at one point, there was just a talk that the grant may include a grill and tables and chairs for outside use. And just to make sure that stays on the list, I don't think it's going to be any problem.
Yes, those would be on the list. We realize the list has somewhat of a movable items, but the idea is to get it to the point where it's the way they want it. And one of the other aspects of it is that it allows the residents to see them. That was important to the firefighters, so the residents knew they were here. They don't keep the bay door open in the winter, but having that and having a way, to interact, I think that space would naturally evolve to some more benefits that we haven't quite seen yet. But having that space ready would allow that.
I don't think there's going to be any problem with it. I just don't want it to
Kitchen
come up.
with no chairs, for example. That wouldn't make sense.
Sorry, Marty. Okay, I just didn't want it to come up as a surprise late in the game and everybody says, well, we never talked about that. So, so I just want to keep it on the list.
okay. Further discussion on this project, the project list or the working committee, any further discussions on that?
Nancy, the other thing that has gotten kind of moved off was the getting these items framed from GHP that we have. That's on the list. I just don't want that to get missed. That's an important piece of this.
I'm not sure that falls into a buildings committee issue, though. I think that that's like furniture and things. So, I mean, I would imagine if you've got the budget to cover it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure this was included in part of the whole process.
Okay.
not specific to fire or a building code.
Yeah, that,
Okay.
that one's another thing that's going to be important for the firefighters to have, and it'll be a part to showcase, because the training room, as it's envisioned, is going to be a very first class, top of class facility. I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities with that. So the framing of the pictures brings in the natural history of Glendale. So I think we don't want to lose that, and that can be started anytime, I guess, unless there's some decisions about frames that have to be made, but that shouldn't be a tough decision. The firefighters can make that.
Yeah, I think the posters, the paper, they're standard size, that probably Frame USA might be a good resource on this.
Yeah, they gave us already on that. I have that.
Okay. Okay.
20.
So no other discussion on the project items or the working committee?
I think, Nancy, just the last thing we talked about, what would be desirable by the fire department and the firefighters, and developing a scope of work, and how that might affect the building itself and who the players are. And it goes without saying that we also have to develop some sort of cost. We need to know what kind of dollars we're talking about. And that's just as important as scope in my mind. So is that part of the function, I would assume, of this working group to gather that, or is that somewhere else?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Unless the Vickers have an open checkbook.
It would need, yeah, unless that's the same. No, you would need to know what budget constraints you're working within, and you would need to know the budget cost of the potential project.
I actually see the working group going, building the scope of work after deliberating on maybe one or two or perhaps three options on how to handle kitchen, that area, the east facade, with various costs associated with it. And I could see the working committee having choice A, choice B, depending upon costs, and presenting those options, those wishes to the building committee to decide on. I mean, or decide's a little tough, but recommending to the building committee for further action. I see that committee as being pretty serious thing. Mr. Bogrand, we're taking him out of retirement from P&G project management to do this. So this, it's pretty serious stuff here. But you're right, Mr. Bessel, you're right. And I understand you've agreed, Mr. Bessel, that we might tap you, this working committee might also tap you for some input on occasion.
If it's necessary. If it's not, no, this is, I have a lot of experience with buildings, old and new, and full Rolodex of contractors.
Excellent, excellent. So I think we can agree we have moved through the heart of this thing. We are at agenda item number 4, which is general public comment. And any public comment from this group?
Can I just say one thing? I'd like to thank Marty and them for their generous offer. And I think that as a council person and someone who's been working on that building for well over a decade or so, it's finally might come up. We've got a great addition, and now we've got a good start. Now we just have to refine how we use it and what has to be added. Because I want to call it, phase 4. because nothing's ever done. And I want to thank the Vishers for all their wonderful, their donation that they're going to come up with. We do really appreciate it, and I hope that that's the spirit of Glendale. So.
Alan, I just want to tag on to that too, to thank you for not only your generosity, but your patience in this, Marty and Ron. Thank you very much. I think we'll end up with getting everything that we wanted, that will fit into this space, and I think it will benefit the firefighters, which is at the heart of the whole project. But thank you very much. Any other comment? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Who's on your committee?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.